So I thought I'd talk about a few things today. I want to start off with obviously I want to talk about what's happening in Minnesota as well at the moment. Thanks for the love hearts, appreciate that. What's happening in Minnesota, and basically one of the things I want to talk about is basic like what I saw yesterday. So I watched the video yesterday of what happened in Minnesota. I watched like three or four different angles, and I wanted to like get an understanding of like what actually happened and all that stuff because I wanted to be like I want to try. I always try to be like a little bit. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. I always try to be a little bit objective. Now I know it's hard to be an objective in times like this, but I do try because I think well one of the benefits of being Australian is I can have a little bit of separation, and therefore I don't want to just jump to conclusions, right? So I really looked at the video. I said to myself, try not forget that you hate Trump. Forget that you hate ICE. Just look at what happened objectively. And I like to think that I'm okay at doing that sort of thing because I criticize the Democrats from time to time as well. My daughter has a colleague who is here on a work visa from Italy, and she was denied re-entry because she has her Facebook account set to private. Wow. Okay, Susan. Unfortunately, Susan, that doesn't surprise me. And they're considering bringing in a new law. I don't know if you've heard about this, where they're going to check your social media accounts. I'll find a way to get you into America. Help me move to Australia, Todd. Yeah. All right. I'll do that, Todd. I'll see what I can do about getting you in here. I don't want to live in America. I just want to go visit. I just want to spend like a couple of weeks because as much as I hate Trump, I love the idea of, traveling widely. Believe the evidence of your eyes, not what Trump and the happy killer says. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And look, that was the thing. Like when I first saw what was going on, the accident on video, I wasn't listening to what Trump was saying, but I also wasn't listening to what our side was saying as well, because obviously in this situation, when it's first happening, your first emotions is to go with what your side wants to think, right? It's just natural instincts. So I put all that aside and I just watched the video, right? I just watched the video, and I'm being like completely objective here, or as objective as I can be. I just couldn't see like to me what I saw is a woman who had been protesting. So obviously she's not a big Trump supporter and she's not a supporter of ICE, but there's nothing illegal about that. You can protest. You don't have to be thing. The other thing that I wanted to work out is why were they chasing her? What had she done to be like? Because it's not illegal to protest ICE, right? So that's not illegal. Now, why would they try to grab her? Now, there was no ICE haven't come out. Christy Nome, after she did that thing about calling her a domestic terrorist, no one has come out and said why they were chasing her. What was the reason they wanted to, talk to her, arrest her, and stuff like that? Now, that's the other thing. Like, there's no they haven't said that she did anything illegal. So she gets into the car and then she drives away. Like she reverses. First, she reverses out. So she's trying to. The one thing you can't argue is that she was trying to get away from them. Right now, okay, is that yeah is now okay? So she's trying to get away from ICE because they were pissed that she was blocking the road. Yeah, exactly. But Bob, I don't know what you're saying. Like, but the reason that like basically protesting and things like that. Now, there have been protests, right, where people glue themselves to the road and all that sort of stuff. But protesting and being like, and stopping traffic or anything like that, they're like misdemeanors, right? They're not a reason why someone should be murdered. So had she done something criminal beforehand, right? Like I'm talking like really criminal, not just protesting and annoying ICE, then they would have had more of it's a traffic violation. That's it. Exactly. So for me, I was like, why are they chasing her? Okay, it's like very small. like a misdemeanors type thing, right? They're not traffic cops. Exactly. They're not traffic cops. Exactly. And then she reverses. So I watched like 6 different videos. I watched the New York Times do an analysis on it. I watched every single video. I even went to places like Fox News and places like that. And I deliberately did that because sometimes you want to hear what the other side is pushing as well, because you don't want to just get one side of the story. So I deliberately went to the other side to see what they're saying. And I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I tried to, right? I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. And on Fox News, because I don't go to I don't when I go to right wing media, I never go to online influencers, because as bad as Fox News is, they're less likely, slightly less likely to fully lie than a Twitter account, right? Because Fox News has been sued for like $800 million for lying. And if you're a news organization, you you are more accountable, not completely for what you can say or do. If you're just if you're a MAGA influencer on Twitter with 3 million followers, nothing's going to happen to you. So I went to Fox News and I saw what they were saying, and it didn't make any sense. So what conservative media is saying is they're saying that she pulled the car forward, right, to ram the police officer. But when you look at the wheels of the wheels of the car are turned to the right. So she first reversed. You wouldn't reverse if you're trying to kill the officer, or you're trying to, like Christy Nome said, domestic terrorism. Why would you reverse and then try to slide to the right? Also, what you need to take into account is that it's in a place which you can see the snow, you can see the ground is icy, right? So when the car is like trying to maneuver, it's maneuvering on ice, right? So it's not maneuvering just on so it's moving around, right? Then the police officer says that, then the next thing that comes out, so Christy Gnomes just bold-faced lies, right, that it's a terrorist attack. Then Trump posts after that, right, that this is actual words, that the police officer or the ICE officer was viciously run over. Well, first of all, he wasn't run over at all. And secondly, he said that he's in hospital recovering. Well, also, that's a lie as well, because he's not in hospital recovering. He never went to hospital. So again, a lot of the Fox may not lie. They can cherry pick the facts and twist them to suit the narrative. Yeah, exactly, David. Yeah, exactly. That's the difference, David, between Fox News and an online MAGA influencer. They try to be a little bit more, and I'm talking about the straight news. I'm not talking about Sean Hannity or Jesse. I'm talking about the straight news of Fox. They try to. They're more careful about how they lie. Yeah. As where if you go on Twitter and it's like Laura Loomer or Benny Johnson or any of these people, there's not even a filter. They don't even try not to lie. So I didn't even bother with them. So I went to the places where conservative media is the least likely to just bold-faced lie to the nth degree, right? So the most honest account you're going to get on conservative side is probably Fox News, and so I deliberately didn't go to their worst person. I went to what is most people probably think is their best option, and they just left out. So and you're exactly right, David. They just left out so much information. And one of the big things they left out is that they didn't talk about what Donald Trump said. They didn't talk about what Christy Nome said. JD Vance got up today and he held a press conference. And in that press conference today, JD Vance he said something like, I've never seen in my whole life, I've never seen such bad faith media coverage about what happened in Minnesota. In Minnesota. He was saying that. So I'm thinking, in the last 24 hours, he's saying that the media has been lying about it, right? If I mean, the fact that he can say that with a straight face is just insane. First of all, he is his boss Trump lied about what happened. Secondly, Kristi Noem lied about what happened. Now, the interesting thing about Kristi Noem saying it was a terrorist attack is that the her organisation, who's looking after ICE, are not actually officially saying that what she did, what Renee did, Renee Nicole Cook, I think her name is, good Renee. Let me get it right. Let me go. Renee Nicole Good, I think it is. Is that her name? Yeah. What she did, and and basically they're not saying it was a terrorist attack. So she says it, but they're not good. That's right. Yeah. Renee Nicole Good, and basically she said it, but then afterwards they're not following through with it. They're not following through with it being a terrorist attack. So it's obviously, so she's in a sense she's admitting she was wrong and that she's lying, because they're not gonna investigate it as a terrorist attack, right? So, and even people like JD Vance and other people are lying allowed them to cloud. Yeah, lying allows them to cloud the facts. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Exactly, David. Because you know, it's just the amounts. Could you imagine? The thing is that so much of this has kind of been normalized now. A lot of it has been normalized, right? I mean, if you think about if this was Barack Obama, hi, Lucid Hex, good to see you. Another fellow Aussie is on here. If you think about what happened, right? G'day, Lucid, g'day. If you think about what happened, um, and how Kristi Noem and how Trump reacted to this with just complete lies, right? Um, and then you think about if this happened under Barack Obama or Joe Biden or anybody else, right? Could you imagine if Barack Obama or Joe Biden, within 5 minutes of it happening, just completely lie and say it's a terrorist attack, or completely lie and say that she was deliberately targeting that person? Not that it does anything to bring back Renee, but that family need to sue the federal government for billions. Yeah. And Bob, I was looking into this. It's funny you said that, Bob, because I was looking into this last night. There would have been a bloody uprising. Exactly right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. If Joe Biden or Barack Obama ever said anything like this, it would have been like Fox News 24/7. Why are they calling this person a terrorist? Why are they doing this? If they ever stopped lying, the coup would be over immediately. Exactly, David. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and the thing is that the amounts, basically Trump has normalized lying to the point where it's so normal now. Like the stuff that comes out of Kristi Noem or Donald Trump, it's so normalized now that people don't even really react to it, because it's hard to react to something when it's happening every day. You know, it's a human thing, right? And I actually don't even blame mainstream media for this, because if you're mainstream media, let's say that you're the New York Times or the Washington Post, and you have to cover Trump lying 100 times a day, and you have to cover Kristi Noem lying, and all these different people in the MAGA just lying all the time, and just bold-faced lying. It's hard to know how they could keep up with that. But what they did yesterday was the beginning of their end. Yeah, I do agree. I do think there's a difference. Um, I think where MAGA is getting things wrong is, I think a lot of people on Twitter now, MAGA is a very online like a lot of the people who are with MAGA are very online, and they're generally on Twitter. That's Twitter's their home. I don't listen to the word coming from any of those people. If I hear their voice, volume goes down. Yeah, gaslighting is how cult leaders and dictators force their victims into submission. Exactly, David. Yeah, yeah. And but the thing is I actually don't think they're getting away with it. And in some ways, I'm not even sure they ever got away with it, right? Let me just have a look at this one. Oh, that's a big one. Look, because they crossed the line from spin into verifiable falsehoods under conditions that trigger oversight, they spoke with certainty where records exist. When claims can be checked against documents, timelines, and witness lies, yeah, exactly, incomplete. Yeah, yeah. Oversight hearings, subpoenas. Yeah, yeah, you're right. The shift of them. Yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, any systems are slow, but they are brutal. Yeah, I think the thing about Trump's lies and a lot of the things that Trump does is that um, ultimately, I do think they say that it takes a lie goes around the world 1,000 times before the truth can catch up to it. Well, I do actually think that eventually the truth will catch up to them. I actually do really believe that. I think that. I think people misunderstand why Trump was elected last year. I think a lot of people in MAGA think that Trump was elected last year, right? A lot of people in MAGA think Trump was elected last year because um, because of what he talked about on Twitter, right? So Trump talked about it a lot about um, trans people playing sports, the culture wars, all that sort of stuff, right? We grew up on the X Files. The truth is out there. Yeah, yeah, that's so true. So true. I grew up on the X Files as well. Gen X. I'm a Gen Xer. And the thing is that I think they don't realize if you go online and you speak to a lot of Twitter people, they will often say things like, well, Trump won by 80 million votes or 85 million votes. He won all these swing states. And in their minds, they think that that gives Trump carte blanche to do whatever he wants. And therefore, they agree with the Twitter. The mistake that the MAGA Twitter hardcore base make is that they don't know that Trump won. The reason why Trump won is because of inflation. The reason why Trump won was because of cost of living. And Trump didn't win because of the base. Trump won because he got swing voters and he got um, independents who some voted for Joe Biden the last time and might have voted for Trump. The people who go back and forwards. And they voted, and a lot of these people don't pay attention to politics, right? When Trump was showing up at the court last year because of all the indictments, when Trump was like accused of all these things, these people were not paying attention to Trump. They were not paying attention to what he was doing. All they cared about was how much am I paying for rent? How come I'm a young person I can't purchase a home, but my parents could purchase a home, right? How come, how come gas prices are going up? How come insurance is going up, grocery prices, all those things, right? Um, so that's why they were voting for him. But if you talk to the MAGA base, they think the 80 million people voted for Trump because of trans people in sport or some culture war. And it's not true. That's not the reason they voted for him. And I'm not guessing. Every single poll, the best polls that come out are not the polls that come out during the election. The polling companies will do what's called research over a 6-month period. That 6-month period over that, and they did it. And the number one reason why people voted for Trump by a billion miles was cost of living. And I mean, hi, Sandra, good to see you. I mean by a very, very large margin. It wasn't because of trans people in sport. It wasn't because of the culture wars. It wasn't because they thought they were too woke or whatever. Immigration played a part. There's no doubt about that. But immigration, you got to look at this worldwide, right? Immigration does affect a lot of countries. Hi, Marnie, good to see you. Immigration does affect a lot of countries, right? And if you look at Europe, there's a lot of far right-wing parties in Europe who are doing very well. In the UK at the moment, the Nigel Farage party, which is the far right-wing party. Um, Hi, Joe. Glad to see you soon again. Thanks, Sandra. Um, the far right-wing party in England is winning because of immigration. Now, hi, Marnie, and and the problem with that is, and so the issue, but the thing is that immigration is a big issue because inflation is a big issue. when you believe, right, when you're someone who's suffering now, cost of living is affecting every country, America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, everyone's having the same experience, right? And what some people, not saying you guys, but what some people in America don't understand is that in Western countries there's always trends that happen, right? So for example, the trend in 2024 was that incumbent governments were being kicked out at record rates like never before. And so Trump was always going to be in the winning seat because of inflation. In fact, if Trump had lost, he would have been one of the only countries to go against the trend of incumbent governments be not being kicked out. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris it was always gonna be difficult for them to win because people blame the incumbent government for their cost of living. And because they're not like you and I, and because they're not like people on Twitter, they don't know, they're not listening to all the information. When Jack Smith did that whole indictment thing into January 6th, I was obsessed with it. I read every single part of the indictment. Amazing indictment. It is one of the best things that I've ever read. Jack Smith, to me, is a hero. Jack Smith is, I think, almost certainly would have won that case against Trump, trying to overthrow the government. But here's a problem. I'm also hi Dave from California. Hi Sandra. I'm also very, very aware, and I constantly have to tell myself all the time. If you're online, hi Dave, if you're online and you spend a lot of time online and you follow politics closely, you have to constantly remind yourself that we are the minority, right? We are the minority. The majority of people are not doing this. They're not following politics at all. They go on instincts. Joe stepped up. What did I say? Yeah. As an American, Robsy, a lot of stupid people that fall for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, a lot of people did fall for this stuff. Yeah, a lot of people did fall for it, but they fell for it because the only Obama went through a pandemic without murdering a million Americans. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, this is where I have hope for America, and obviously, as an Australian, a lot of times people, Trump, uh, just so you know, like Trump affects everything that happens around the world, which is like people like myself and other people on here who are Australian. We feel like we're invested in this because we don't want Trump hurting other Americans who think like us, and we don't want Trump hurting other countries. Um, but the thing about Trump, and that where I feel there's good news, and is that if you look at all the polling, Trump is doing very bad. I mean, very bad. He's lost all the swing voters. He's lost all the independents. The Latinos have come back to the Democratic Party. Young people have come back to the Democratic Party. So I do think there's a lot of positives for the Democrats. And I think that's the reason why MAGA is rushing everything through, because I think they do know that once the midterms come around, they're not going to have the control that they do now. Um, I mean, they certainly would still be able to create a lot of problems for sure. Even because Trump goes around a lot of things, but I do actually think that that there is some good signs. Yeah, and that is that the people, the same people who voted for Trump last year based on cost of living are now going to vote for Democrats based on cost of living. Because here's the problem for MAGA, right? They are now the incumbent government. And if you look around the world, there is an incumbency thing happening, right? And that is Trump has been in power for almost a year. All those people who weren't paying attention to politics last year, who voted for Trump because they thought he was going to fix, because they blamed him for, they blamed Biden. I need some good signs, Joe, because I'm not feeling it living in America. Yeah, exactly. And look, Marnie, I'm not saying that it's great. I'm just saying that, hi, Natalie, good, thanks for joining. I'm just saying that I think there are some positive signs. I think, like, I will say this. This is the sad part about this. I do think Democrats are going to do very well in the midterms. I could see. I do think they're going to do really well in the midterms. I do think Trump, MAGA are confused about how it works. I will say the only thing is I do think we are. I think Trump is a lame duck president, but you don't have to be. That the thing is Trump doesn't have to run again to have power because he can endorse someone, right? So thank you, Joe, for saying it. There's not easy way out of this, but we still get through it. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because there is hope because I think that Trump has more power. It's obvious that there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who don't like Trump. There's a lot of weasels in the Republican Party. There's a lot of like spineless people in the Republican Party, right? And but if you listen to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I'm not a fan of, I don't believe this. I don't believe this thing where she's going on the View. And I'm not convinced by any of that. But I do believe her when she says that. Um, I do believe her when she says things like behind the scenes, there are a lot of Republicans in Congress who don't like what Trump is doing, but they're too scared to go out against him. Hi, Kat, thanks for joining. So now that that could actually be a positive, right? That could actually be a positive. Hi, Kat. That could be a positive because those Republicans who are basically too weak to stand up to Trump, um, if if the midterms comes around and it is a complete bloodbath, a blue wave, so to speak, those people, right, Republicans won't care as much about what Trump says. Trump's power in the Republican Party is because if you go against him, he will basically eliminate you from the party. But if the midterms is a bloodbath and most of it is due to Trump or his policies, um, then Trump loses his power within the Republican Party, and I think you will see a lot more dissent within the Republican Party than you're seeing now. So I do think there are some positives. However, if if things change between now and the midterms, and the midterms are either very close or that changes everything. Yeah, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I really don't think that's going to be the case because um, the things that are worrying. Here's the bad part, right? It's not bad, but it's kind of bad in a way. I don't think Republicans and Trump are going to be kicked out and lose their power because of some of the crazy things they're doing, right? I don't think there's enough Americans who really care about Trump's illegal activities, like enriching himself. Natalie, Trump will sick his DOG on Republicans who go against him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Democrats are going to wipe them out in the midterms. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. Yeah, exactly. Hi, Shane. Thanks for joining, Shane. And I've got to say that the only sad part about this is that I I would love to. You know what I would love? I would love that the people are turning against Trump because they finally saw who he was as a person. Right? They said, "Oh my God, you know, he's found liable sexual assault. He's been found. He's convicted of fraud. He's enriching himself and his family." All that sort of stuff. That's the reason why we don't dislike him. The truth of the matter is I don't think that's the reason why the polling is so bad about Trump. Because if that was the case, he would never have been elected, right? So the sad part is that most of the unhappiness about Trump. I'm not saying that some of that stuff wouldn't eat away some of his support. It probably does, but not enough to make him very unpopular. The number one reason he's unpopular is cost of living. So people are making decisions not on, not yet. He wants to invade Greenland. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Invading Greenland, David, is the craziest thing. Like, I mean, you know, I I I I would like to think, David, that him saying he wants to invade Greenland would make millions and millions of Americans who vote say, there's no way I'm going to vote for someone who wants to invade Greenland. And then basically, which is a territory of Denmark. This is the weirdest thing about this whole Greenland thing, right? Like, I know this isn't how it will play out, but if you think about it, it's just so weird. Hi, Marcus. Thanks for joining. If you think about it, it's just so weird, right? If America invaded Greenland, which is a territory of Denmark, and Denmark is part of NATO, and America is part of NATO, right? Then America invades, Denmark triggers Article 5, right? Which means that NATO then has to come to protect Denmark and Greenland. But part of NATO is America. So you would have America invading and, technically speaking, then defending Denmark at the same time. if they went ahead with Article 5, it's just such a ridiculously almost comical thing that would happen. But and I did hear, like, Marco Rubio, Marco Rubio is more old school Republican, kind of like, establishment. No one wants that because it would end NATO and start. Yeah, exactly, David. I don't think Marco Rubio is behind this thing. Marco Rubio is behind Venezuela. He's behind going after Cuba. Marco Rubio is one of those he's got a heritage from Cuba, that community to Cuba. They think if you get rid of Venezuela, then you're going to eventually Cuba will collapse because Venezuela was supporting Cuba. So, but in terms of Greenland, I don't think that's a Marco Rubio thing. Marco Rubio might be thinking, well, let's buy it off them. But Marco Rubio, I don't think would be behind invading Greenland. But in saying that, he's such a weasel that he would probably go along with it. And the crazy thing is that Trump will go out, oh, little Marco, he's really bad because he knows better. Yeah, little Marco Rubio, little Marco. The thing about Trump and saying that he wants to invade Greenland and saying that he wouldn't like military, he wouldn't he wants to buy, and if they say no, he wouldn't discount military action. Is Marco Rubio's response to that was, well, it's a negotiating tactic, right? So threatening Greenland with military action if they don't give you their land is a negotiating tactic. Now, think about this, right? The United States is the most powerful country on the planet, and they're saying to Greenland, we're going to say to Denmark, we're going to take Greenland, right? But if you don't give it to us, we're going to invade you. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's a threat, right? That's a threat. Like, that would be like if I knew someone was a homeowner and I walked up to that person and I said, here's a bunch of papers and I want you to sign over your house to me, right? And I just need you to fill out this information. I want to own your house. And they turn around and go, no, I'm not giving you my home. And then they pull out a gun, right? Then you pull out a gun and you go, will you sign the papers now? And they go, yes. Now, imagine that goes to court, right? And the guy says, and the defense of the guy who pulled out the gun was, it was just a negotiating tactic. Like, that would be illegal. You can't use military threat as a negotiating tactic against a Western ally, because that isn't a negotiating tactic. You are basically threatening a country which almost has no military, is a very peaceful country, is like the beacon of democracy, and the United States is the most powerful military on the planet, that is not a negotiating tactic. Yeah. So it is just absolute craziness from that side of politics, pretending like it is a negotiating tactics when it isn't. But yeah, it is absolute nuttiness from that side. Greenland, then going after Colombia, all these sort of stuff like that. It's like one thing after another with these people, and it's all been normalized. I mean, I just don't even, some of the crazy stuff that you hear, it doesn't even make the news anymore. Like something crazy, like the other day, one of the biggest influencers on the right is Tucker Carlson. He's got one of the biggest audiences, Tucker Carlson. And he was talking the other day on his Twitter account, and he was interviewing someone. And he was riffing that the reason why Maduro was kidnapped by America and they bombed Maduro and they bombed Venezuela was because Maduro, who, and a lot of people say he's like far left, but he's actually very, very conservative. Very, very, Maduro was very conservative. He was against gay marriage. He was hated anything woke, right? So there were some people on the right who liked Maduro, and those people were Megyn Kelly, and the other one was Tucker Carlson. Now they wouldn't say they liked him, but they would often quote that it's a very, very conservative government, right? So Tucker is talking to someone on his podcast and he's riffing away, and he says, nobody's talking about this. And that's how a lot of the conspiracy theories people always start a conversation, is they will say, why is, nobody's talking about this. Like, if you're not talking about something in their world, it means there's a cover up. They never think that the reason why no one's talking about a particular subject is because it's not actually real. Oh my God, too funny. I saw that. Tucker is absolutely insane with the concern. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then so Tucker, this is my, I mean, you have to, there is a comical side to this. You have to laugh. Yeah. So this is actually true. This is actually true. There is a conspiracy, and it's been around for a while, and it's called a global homo conspiracy. Global homo conspiracy. That's actually the name of it. And this conspiracy, which is Tucker Carlson is pushing, which has been around for about a year now, is that there is a cabal, an elite cabal group of elite, rich, powerful gay people all around the world in Western countries who are pushing gay marriage onto countries that don't have gay marriage. So it's basically the deep state, but run by evil gay people, right? And they're all around the world. He can't actually name any of these people. By the way, there's no like people that, yeah. So yeah, Tucker is 100% like closet homosexual for sure. He's obsessed with gay people. So then it gets even funnier, right? Because then Tucker says, I'm trying. Yeah, it's border so I'm trying to keep a straight face. Okay, this is actually really serious. This is really serious. And if you know any gay people out there, you know that they could be possibly involved. The gay people in my life now, after I heard this story, I'm now looking at them very suspiciously. So Tucker starts the story with, nobody's talking about this, right? So again, must be a conspiracy because no one is talking about this. And then he says, why is nobody talking about that it's possible that the reason why the United States bombed Venezuela and kidnapped Maduro is because he's a conservative who wanted to get who was against gay marriage. And the reason why Trump, he didn't mention Trump by name, never mentions Trump by name, very important, but he will talk about things that the administration does, but he never mentions Trump by name. That's very important. But he'll always talk about things they do, right? which is always like a slippery thing that that Tucker does. Never mention the dear leader's name. But he's talking about Trump, right? And he said the reason why the Trump administration, he didn't say Trump administration, the reason he said they didn't remember the opposition leader of Venezuela, who probably won the last election. She's currently in Oslo, Norway. And Tucker Carlson said the reason that the Trump administration didn't replace Maduro with her is because she wants to she would probably want to bring in she's probably against gay marriage. Or she wants to bring in gay marriage. Yeah. She wants to bring in gay marriage. So the conspiracy is basically so in his head, he thinks the opposition leader will eventually become part of the Venezuela government because she's pro gay marriage, or she might try to bring in gay marriage. Now, the problem for his argument is that Trump said he didn't want her to be elected. Remember, Trump said she's very nice, but I don't think she's the right person. So that argument doesn't even make sense because they're not going to. But in Tucker's mind, he thinks eventually she will be put back into the government, and because she's pro-gay. So just to recap, the Trump administration, who Pete Hegseth is in charge of the military, who's the most anti-DEI, anti-woke person on the planet, who has said things like before, like the gay mafia. He's called it like the gay mafia. In Tucker Carlson's mind, he thinks this administration run by Trump, anti-woke, these are the same people who go on about Pride Month 100 times a day. Those conservatives who talk about Pride Month all the time, and they go, "Oh, Pride Month, oh, it's all the time." And I've got to say this: the only reason I know that Pride Month is ever on in America is not because of gay people online who tell me about it, or because of a liberal. It's always because MAGA people online are obsessed with talking about it. They will often start a conversation with, "Oh, just so everybody knows, Pride Month is starting on Monday. Not that I care about it, but I'm probably going to tweet about it 100 times a day." Nobody talks more about Pride Month than MAGA. Nobody publicizes Pride Month more than MAGA. I mean, I don't know any liberals who even barely talk about it. But if you go onto a social media account on Twitter about thanks, Joe, for turning this into trash. You could not pay me to watch Tucker Carlson. Thanks, Joe, for tuning in. Yeah, so true, Joe. Yeah. Well, look, sometimes you have to look at the comedic side of it. Otherwise, you can go crazy, because as crazy as this stuff is, I feel like if you laugh at this stuff, I feel like in some ways it's a positive, because maybe there's people out there who, watch something or hear someone and they hear Tucker Carlson talk like that, and then they think that's pretty crazy. I'm a Trump, they could say I'm a Trump supporter, but that's pretty nutty stuff. Yeah, yeah. And nobody talks about trans people more than MAGA. That's right. Trans online. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're obsessed. They're obsessed with trans people. They're obsessed with talking about gay people. One of the biggest slurs that you get online by MAGA, just for saying, like, I could be talking about economics online, and they will just call you the F word, and they'll just say you're gay. It's they're just, that's their number one slur, is calling someone gay, right? So, they are obsessed. That's the word, obsessed. Yeah, they are. They're obsessed with Pride Month. They're obsessed with gay people. Tucker Carlson. And by the way, like, a lot of people say, don't, Tucker Carlson is. I wouldn't comment about Tucker Carlson if Tucker Carlson had five people watching him. But Tucker Carlson has tens of millions of people who watch him. He has a massive audience. So even if you don't watch him, there are millions of people watching him. He has a big audience. And it makes me think that when they hear Tucker Carlson, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. When it makes me think when Tucker Carlson thinks that the United States bombed Venezuela and and took Maduro away because because Maduro was against gay marriage. I mean, that story would be crazy even if there was a Democrat. Doesn't speak much of humanity. Yeah, exactly, Dave. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, Even if you had the most woke Democrat in power as the president, you would still think it would be crazy that they would remove Maduro because he was against gay marriage. That wouldn't happen even if there was a Democrat or a woke Democrat. No, people in politics don't care about that stuff that much. Yeah. So either side of politics. Yeah. So again, but the fact that Trump is talking about the Trump administration caring about it is insane. Yeah. So anyway, that's Globo, Homo, uh, Deep State. Keep an eye on it. I never knew it existed. Globo Homo. It was a good enough for J. Edgar Hoover. Globo Homo. It just rolls off the tongue. Globo Homo. Deep State. Elite conspiracies. It would be great. Like if you're gonna do a conspiracy like that, the only thing I would like add to it is that you got to be able to say someone's name. Like you can't say there's a global elite of gay people trying to overthrow governments to bring in gay marriage. Like this is like the George W. Bush version of going around the world and trying to implement democracy or steal their oil. So instead of that, we now have a gay group of neo. So I'm assuming it's like a gay neocon group, gay neocons trying to regime change to bring in gay marriage. It's all very true. I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm going to tell you, but I do love the conspiracy. I've got to say, I do find it quite funny, that conspiracy. Um, so yeah, so basically, jump on board this global. But at least if I was Tucker and I was pushing this type of conspiracy, I would at least have one or two names. And the other thing about Tucker is nobody talks more about Pete Buttigieg than Tucker Carlson. He is obsessed with Pete Buttigieg, right? He even said once that he doesn't think Pete Buttigieg is gay. More than likely, it's a global elite of child molesters trying to normalize pedophilia. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's obsessed. Like Tucker Carlson talks about Pete Buttigieg all the time, and he will often say things like, "I don't actually think he's gay. I actually don't think he's gay. I think he's doing it to get the gay vote." So just to recap, there is global neocon elites going around the world trying to regime change, and also Pete Buttigieg is pretending to have sex with men his whole life, even before he got into politics, because he thought it would be good to get more voters in. I gotta say, if that was true, that Pete Buttigieg was gay just to get more votes, I don't think I would have picked the area where he is geographically to be in. Like maybe that would make more sense if he was in San Francisco, but he's in the Midwest. That's hardly like something that's a positive thing for Pete Buttigieg, right? To be gay in the Midwest. So Tucker was probably trafficked by Epstein. Probably, yeah. Tucker Carlson is an amazing man. Um, but yeah, I mean, the right wing media. Oh my god, yeah. Now the right wing media is just so crazy at the moment, with so much conspiracies and wild stuff that's going on. And I feel in a way it kind of covers for Trump a bit in a sense because it, you have so many people who are eating up all this complete and utter bullshit. You've got Candace Owens, who's lying all the time about, conspiracies. You've got purely speculation, of course, but then there's JD Vance. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to say that the anti woke people and the, people obsessed with gay people, and then the MAGA party, and then you've got Donald Trump who wears more makeup than a drag queen, and you've got JD Vance who wears eyeliner. Like like it's incredible. Like I was watching JD Vance being interviewed, and he had so much makeup on. It looked like he had lipstick, eyeliner, yeah, all these sort of stuff. And then the next week he'll talk about how the left is too woke, the left is too concerned about gay people, the left is it, and I'm like, I don't know. On some level, is it trolling? Is it trolling? Because if it's, I kind of get it if it's trolling. You know what I mean? Like, is this just bullshit to troll people? Like, because that would make more sense to me that you would. Vance was trans in college, right? Yeah. But yeah, like Vance hillbilly Maybelline. That's right. Yeah. I mean, Vance is like, if you look at pictures from Vance when he was young, I mean, he was like the nerdy kid. He was, nerdy kid. He was into, you know, Comic Con and all that sort of stuff. He was the opposite of what you see now, right? He grew a beard and he tried to become a different person, right? And I think there's a lot of this going on, and I'm not saying it's a driving force, but do you remember that movie Revenge of the Nerds in the 80s? Revenge of the Nerds. It's a great movie from the 80s. I think it won like 6 or 7 Academy Awards. I can't remember, but it won a lot of Academy Awards. It was considered one of the best films of the time, Revenge of the Nerds. And if you haven't seen Revenge of the Nerds, it's about a bunch of nerds in high school. They wear like glasses and they got the little pocket, calculators and all that and things like that. And they were like outcasts. But at the end, I don't want to spoil it for you because you've probably already seen it. I can't remember who the director. I think it might have been Martin Scorsese. I think was it Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg or I can't remember. It was one of those great directors that directed it, and it was just a beautifully filmed film. And in that, at the end, the nerds win. The nerds get the girls. They end up with money and stuff like that. I kind of feel like what we're seeing in MAGA is, hi, Kimmy, nice to see you, Kimmy. I kind of feel like no, Revenge of the Nerds didn't win any awards. Rob, I'm not going to have you lie about Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Words won 14 Academy Awards, including Best Actors, Best Film, Best Cinematography, Best. And Rob, I'm not going to have you tell me no. That's just not true. So they had fantastic director. I think it was Martin Scorsese. Great film people. Revenge of the Nerds director. No, please. I think it was Martin Scorsese. Do not look that up. Don't listen to Rob. Do not listen to anyone, and do not look up yourself. Okay, it's a great film. And what I think is happening in the MAGA movement at the moment is a kind of Revenge of the Nerds. Think about all the people who are now getting the power. Right? You've got Elon Musk. Elon Musk, as a young guy, would have been a character in Revenge of the Nerds. Right? Peter Thiel, Revenge of the Nerds. You've got all these like tech nerds, all the tech nerds, right? JD Vance, Revenge of the Nerds, right? You've got a whole Bill Ackman, Revenge of the Nerds, right? There's a whole bunch of them in the Trump administration who would have been central characters in this show, in the MAGA movement. And now we're seeing Revenge of the Nerds come true 40 years later. And that says to me that not only was Revenge of the Nerds an amazing award-winning film with amazing acting, but it also was ahead of its time. And it showed that a lot of those people who were considered nerds in high school ended up getting the best looking women. Some of them did because of money. And they ended up becoming very, very rich and very powerful. So whenever I look at the MAGA movement and I look at, I look at all those people in the MAGA party, there is so many of them. There is a theory, but yeah, the people you're naming are all really grifters, posers as nerds. Yeah, yeah, but they were like a lot of them were. A lot of them were nerds in high school. Like a lot of those people were actually nerds in high school. Peter Thiel was a nerd in high school. JD Vance was a nerd in high school. Um, 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 Zuckerberg was a nerd in high school. Um, Ackman was a nerd. Bill Ackman was a big nerd in high school. So a lot of these people were actually nerds in high school, and because Bill Gates was definitely a nerd in high school, yeah, and so a lot of them were. And look, I have nothing against nerds at all. Nothing against at all. I think there's nothing wrong with being a nerd, but I do think it's sort of a lot of these same people who are, and I'm not saying it's because of that's the number one motivation. I'm not saying that's the number one motivation, but I do think if you grew up and you were ostracized and you didn't have a big friendship group, and then suddenly you get older, you become more successful, right? I love nerds too, Mountie. I'm a big fan of nerds, big fan of nerds. Um, and but if you become more successful, I think in that case, and then you're given money and you're given this, you can be a little bit more easily swayed by, that sort of thing of, and again, AI tech giants and data collective companies taking control of government. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of the tech people have become part of MAGA, definitely become part of MAGA, right? And I do think that, so obviously it's a little bit simplistic just saying because they're nerds, but a lot of these people are also the same people who go on about masculinity, right? Which is kind of the funny part. A lot of the people who talk about masculinity and that men can't be men are people like Zuckerberg, right? Are people like JD Vance, are people like Tucker Carlson, are people like Ben Shapiro, are people like Peter Thiel, Bill Ackman. They'll often talk about how men are not allowed to be men anymore, right? That they've lost their ability to be masculine. Some of the least masculine people in the MAGA movement are talking about men not allowed to be more manly. There is a slight irony there, I will say about that. But yeah, but again, I just feel like that there's a lot of fake masculinity in the MAGA movement, and they often will say it with things like, they'll mix it in with things like white, white identity politics, right? So some of these people, they come from South Africa. You might not know this, but Australia and South Africa are actually quite close in terms of a lot of South Africans immigrate to Australia. A lot of South Africans immigrate to Australia. So we have a lot of South Africans who live here, mostly white. Mostly white South Africans come to Australia. And where I live in Brisbane is one of the biggest areas where they immigrate overseas. And all these South Africans that I know who immigrate to Australia, they're not racist, right? But, it's a big but, they will often say that a lot of white South Africans, right, do have a racist element to them. Some of them, not all of them. Big tech controlling government with no oversight. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. Sorry, little sons. I've never worried about how manly I was or society. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I think the more that people worry about, how manly you are or how masculine you are, I think you're kind of revealing more about yourself. Do you know what I mean? I think you're revealing more about yourself than other people. I I personally I personally have nothing wrong with, like, if someone wants to go to the gym 7 days a week, if someone wants to lift weights 7 days a week, if someone wants to um, you know, watch sports 24/7, go for it. Go do it. Why not? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. If someone doesn't want to do any of that stuff, then go for it and do it. So I don't see criticism on any side, for that. I just think men should be able to be masculine if they want to, as long as it's not toxic, or not be masculine if they don't want to. But I think the MAGA side is they don't want any diversity within any sex. They want women to be in a small little thing here, and you've got to fit into this particular, the Overton window is about this big. And they want men to be in this Overton window, which is about this big. They don't want to adore it. But the reality is that's just not reality. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, if someone on the left had a go at some guy for going to the gym, I would defend the guy going to the gym because there's nothing wrong with that, right? Then there's the man bun thing. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, yeah. The man bun thing, it's like, I'm not a big fan of it. But again, I'm a libertarian when I come to this stuff. If you want to wear a man bun, go for it. Go for it. Yeah, yeah. Exactly, Joe. What you're saying is men's liberation, which MAGA hates as much as women's. Exactly. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, the way I look at it is if a woman wants to stay home and look after her babies, then I think she should be okay to do that and not receive criticism for it. If a woman wants to work part-time and look after it, then do it. I just don't see that I don't think there's a wrong answer to any of this. I don't think there's a wrong answer to a couple, a man and a woman, a straight couple, saying the man wants to go to work and a woman, if that's what they want to do, because it was like traditional, I still don't think it's a problem, right? Exactly. If you want to wear a bun or even beehive, yeah. I'm gonna stop at the beehive. I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop at the beehive. That should be illegal. If you want to wear a kilt or a tonga, go for it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm a live or let live kind of person. Exactly, Marnie. I've always thought that about you. Exactly. And that goes for everything. The Overton window for man and woman should be so big on either side. You should be allowed to be Hulk Hogan, and you should be allowed to be like the complete opposite. Kids are so comfy. I'm Scottish and have one in the fair. Oh wow, yeah. I've actually so Rob. I went to a friend of mine got married to a Scottish woman years ago, about like 15 years ago, and I went to Edinburgh, and the wedding was in Edinburgh, and it was in this place that was out in the rural area, and we all wore them. We all wore kilts and stuff like that. It was beautiful, and I've got to say, it felt really good. Maybe too good. It felt really good wearing it was like wearing. It's like when you come out of the shower wearing a towel. It feels kind of. I won't go any, but yeah. So I think in passing on that, just saying that it's okay to be everything in there. Okay, so yeah, but I do think MAGA don't like people not fitting into certain boxes, and it's a very conservative thing. It's like they want to take America back to the 1940s or the 1950s, and they look at it like maybe too good. Exactly. Yeah, Rob, exactly. Yeah. It did feel like I could see myself wearing that like outside of a wedding, to be honest with you. And I yeah, it does feel quite freeing. And actually sometimes when I've been, because where I live in Brisbane, it's very warm, it's very hot and humid. And I've been out like drinking, like gone out drinking, freeballing. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, David, but yeah, absolutely right. And I've been out and we're at a bar or something. It's during the day. It's very warm, and where the guys are all dressed in like shirts and pants, and the women are just wearing like these like floral like dresses, and it's like, and you look at that and you think that would be a lot more comfortable. That would be a lot more comfortable. But yeah, my husband and son love kilts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think men in kilts is cool. Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah, it is. It was a bit graphic. It was a bit graphic from David, but remember, we are opening the oval. It is David was very much correct with his analysis of the kilt. and why it's so popular. But yeah, so I think they do want to go back to like the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. And the thing is that um, I don't actually think low interest rates, this personal sexual preferences should have nothing to do with politics. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the best thing for Democrats, I think in this day and age, right, politicians, um, I think this day and age, politicians should stay out of politics, or stay out of like culture wars. I really do. Even on the left, I think they should stay out of it. Like, let the culture wars play out outside of politics, because I think you don't want to get because there are so many people who think so many different ways that if you're a mainstream political party and you start saying what you believe, and 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 those people, a lot of people don't believe it, then I just think I think state, yeah, I'd wear a kilt. Fact is, I have a common oh, Irish paternal ancestor related to Neil of the. Oh, right, okay, wow, David, I had no idea. Yeah, paternal ancestors related to. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think yeah, so I think it's good to stay out of the culture wars. I think Democrats have kind of learnt that now. They've kind of learnt that talking about trans people, and not that they didn't talk about it at all. Republicans would love nothing to get their base upset without wedge issues. Yeah, the thing is that culture issues are always won by the right in terms of politics, right? And I think it's always won by the right because the way they win it is not necessarily because people are against woke things like gay marriage or anything like that, or whatever they think is gay marriage. It's because it's always weaponized in a way of saying Democrats are so focused on woke issues that they're not focused enough on economic issues. And I think that's a winning strategy for Republicans. And so last year, when they did those ads showing the trans people and all that sort of stuff, and they said they're focused on them. We're not. They're focused um, on they them, and we are focused on you. So you don't want to get wedged into a position where you don't want to get wedged into a position where um, people are suffering economically, which is the number one issue why people are going to vote. Generally speaking, is going to be cost of living. And if you make another issue bigger than that, it sends a message to the electorate that the number one issue that they care about is not your number one issue. And it says that to the electorate that, okay, yeah, you, you, it's okay for you to worry about that stuff because you're not going through what we're going through. They kind of feel like it's trivializing their everyday lived experience. And they kind of, and often when you see polling about what people don't like about Democrats, they will often say things like they focus too much on cultural issues. In my opinion, Democrats fail to embrace their base and their issues. Yeah, I mean, as long as, David, I would agree with that, as long as those issues are economic. The economic issues, because in America, you have the electoral college, and those swing states are mostly made out of places where working class people live. And so, and those swing states are not the kind of states that want to talk about cultural issues or or things that you know things that like that. They want to talk about things like jobs, health insurance, health policies, cost of living. My rents are too expensive. My homes are too expensive. And if the Democrats are talking about racial issues like, white, oh, it's too much racism. Um, there's not enough people supporting trans people. Or that's like, if you talk about that and you're someone living in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or Michigan, in one of those key states, you're going to lose. And there's not enough Democrats in those states. Economics, race, income equality, for the yeah. see, I agree. I agree with economics. I agree with where is Nibbles. um, Kimmy, I'm starting to think you're only here for Nibbles. Are you only here for Nibbles and not for me? She's on that couch today, so you can't see her. Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, economics, unlike other Dems who fall for a public, Mandami was great, staying focused. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think Zoran Mandami is a good example of how a Democrat would run. But at the same time, I'm not completely convinced that Zoran Mandami, if he could run as a president, those Dems were constantly fighting against Trump attacks. Yeah. I mean, if you look at last year's election, um, Democrats didn't run on woke. The right does it too, constantly with the crap about being manly, apologizing for being. Yeah, it is true. It is true that the Republicans do actually are obsessed with woke issues, not woke issues, with identity politics and all that. It's just for some reason they get away with it. I can't work out. It is true they do actually get away with it, and I'll give you an example. They're obsessed with white identity politics at the moment. All you hear about now, like Elon Musk, right, an ex-white South African, is constantly talking about genocide of white people in South Africa, which is not happening. That's actually constantly being on the defense is a losing strategy. Yeah, yeah, I agree, David. In my opinion, I think the way that the Democrats could have, I think, in my opinion, I actually think the Democrats were always going to lose last year because of inflation. That's just my opinion. But that's yeah. But I do believe that the Democrats could have lost by less last year if Kamala Harris if Kamala Harris had not ignored the ads about trans people and about cultural issues. I think the reason why it was successful on their side because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were not talking about cultural issues. In fact, they were running away from cultural issues. They ran away from cultural issues so much they ended up in the hands of Liz Cheney. Like anybody who's walking around with Liz Cheney, you can't call them woke, right? Hi, Levy, good to see you. And so, in my opinion, I think the way they could have fought back last year, right, is by acknowledging the ads that they were running and fighting it. And this is how I would have said it. This is how I would have said it. I would have said I would have run ads, right? And I would have ran these ads in the swing states. Like it doesn't matter California, New York. I'm talking about the Midwest, right? I'm talking about swing states. You need that electoral college. I would have said the Republican parties and Trump are obsessed with the culture wars. They're obsessed with trans people. We haven't, Tim and I have not mentioned trans people, gay people, or any of those people at all. However, the Trump administration is spending $120 million running ads talking to you about culture wars. They're not spending $120 million talking about cost of living. They're not spending $120 million talking about economics. Your rents, your things. I would have switched it on them. I would have turned it around on them because the fact of the matter was the people obsessed with culture wars was the Trump administration. But because the Democrats were so scared to talk about it and they were so frightened of being like labeled woke, is they ceded the ground to the Republicans. And if you don't fight back against it, then they define you. And because the Democrats pretended like that wasn't happening, the Republicans and Trump were able to define the Democratic Party. And because that's what happens if you cede the ground, if you don't fight back. Yet I felt like they had a very, very strong position because what the Republicans were saying was a lie. They were not. I don't think the Democrats spent $1 on talking about woke. Yet the Republican Party spent $140 million. It was the number one ad, the most expensive ads, talking about trans people in sport. They didn't spend almost anything talking about economic conditions. So I guess what I'm saying is the Republicans, the whole idea of the hi Joe, what does your shirt mean? Oh, Countdown is an old Australian TV show that used to that so it used to so it was Countdown. So a bit like they would count down from the top 20 hits of Australian. So it was a TV show about music. It's like a music show, and they'd have top 20 hits. So it was like a countdown, and they would interview musicians from overseas. Like you'd have Led Zeppelin coming here. You'd have the Beatles. It's been around like it's been in Australia since the 50s. I think it's no longer around, but it was like a music show. It was a famous music show in Australia. You can Google Countdown, and it was hosted by a very, very cool guy. Yeah, on YouTube. So yeah, it's an old for Australians, they would know it. Yeah. So yeah, so it's basically a music show. So what was I saying? Yeah. So basically, I think the whole thing about last year and the tactics by the Republican Party was they were able to find the Democratic Party as not being interested in economics enough. And in hindsight, and I don't necessarily disagree with what the Democrats did, but this is true. It's just true is that most Americans don't care about whether Trump is considered an authoritarian. In fact, all the polling shows that if you look at the electorate in America, if you look at swing voters, you look at independents, you look at Republicans, and you look at Democrats. Whenever they do polling about who cares about whether Trump is an authoritarian, right? It's 90% is coming from the Democrats, right? About 20% comes from independents and swing voters. Obviously, Republicans don't care about that. So it does make sense when you think about it. And it makes sense to why Trump was elected last year, because the swing voters and the independents is how Trump got elected. And they didn't care. The issue of him being authoritarian was not a big issue. The party told you to reject the evidence in your eyes, and it was their final, most essential command. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think because of that, because most people, because most people don't in America who decides who gets elected in America is not Democrats or Republicans. It's swing voters and independents, and they don't view Trump being authoritarian as the number one issue. They view a solid 80% of people in South Carolina where I currently live couldn't even define what an authoritarian is. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. The thing is you always have to think of this, because I think it's very easy. I say this all the time. I know I'm repeating myself, but when you're like us and you're talking about politics and following politics every day, it's very easy to start to think that everyone else is doing the same thing. But when you realize that most people are not, it's not necessarily that they looked at what Trump was doing and thought that that's okay. It's that they didn't really understand what he was doing. I want to give you an example. The documents case, right? The documents case. Now, he was indicted for the documents case. Now, what happened there, right, is you have Joe Biden, who also took documents home. You have Mike Pence, who took documents home, and you have Trump, right? Now, for us, we know the difference. When Joe Biden found the documents, he didn't obstruct. When Mike Pence found the articles, he didn't obstruct. When Trump found when the articles were found, the documents were found at his house, not only did he obstruct, he tried to have them moved. He did all these things. But for the average American who's not following politics closely, they don't see the difference. They don't see the difference. All they think is they all do it. They're all as bad of each other. And that's the reason why I think the whole Trump is an authoritarian, Trump is doing bad and stuff like that, is because what Trump and MAGA would do is they would throw mud at the other side. Well, Joe did that. Pence did that. And when you have an audience who's not paying attention that closely, sold them to right. Yeah, exactly. Sold that closely. All they're thinking is, well, wait a sec. Sounds like they're all doing the same thing. Why is Trump the bad guy? So, the Jack Smith one, which to me is the strongest case out of everything, the Jack Smith case, I love Jack Smith. I'm a nerd. Speaking of nerds, I read through his indictment 100 times. I could tell you everything about the January 6th, 7 fake slate of electors. Maybe one day I'll do a video on it because it's the most interesting thing ever. It's the most diabolical thing ever. But the problem with the Jack Smith document, January 6th, is it's very complicated. It is so complicated when you look at all the stuff. So, again, most Americans are not going to read through the indictments, complicated indictments, and look at what's happening. Then it gets even worse. Then you have a fractured media where everyone is listening to different sides, right? Yeah, Jack Smith is amazing. I love Jack Smith. Jack Smith reminds me of those old Americans from the 50s and 60s where, Kevin Costner would play them or something like that. Those old school, very moral, very upstanding, very, I just can't tell you how much I love Jack Smith. I love him. I love him. But yeah, so over here it was Casey Kasem, American's top 40 hits. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 So I think the issue here is destroy Department of Education for a reason. Yeah, exactly. There is too many uninformed people going around, and if you look at the polling, the most likely reason if there's when they do polling, they do high information voters and they do low information voters, right? So it's not going to surprise you that low information voters voted for Trump at massive rates and high information voters voted for Democrats at high rates, right? So Trump takes advantage of low information voters. The problem for the Democrats is there are more low information voters than there are high information. I dream of Jack Smith being the Democratic and getting all the rat bastards. Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe if the Democrats win the midterms, and maybe if Democrats win in 2028, we might see Jack Smith being able to open up that case again. Let's see. I hope so. I really hope so, because he put so much work into that documents case. Honestly, yeah. Let's just read this. Yeah. So he put that so much work into those document case. It was basically hundreds of pages document, but the thing is, it was so complicated. I meet very few people who would have the time to read that, the information, all that sort of stuff. So and it's totally understandable. Like, who has time to read through all that stuff? So, and again, so you have all this fractured media where everyone's watching their own type of media. In the old days, you might have like 6 or 7 news organizations, right? Everyone comes home, they're watching the same news. They're all hearing Trump did this, Trump did that. But now that's not, why did Trump pull us out of those international organizations? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think, are you talking, yeah, exactly. I think are you talking about Kimmy, are you talking about the climate change ones? I think he just recently pulled us straight. Yeah. I hope there's no statute of limitations, Jack Smith's cases. Yeah. I don't think there's a statute of limitations, but I think his Achilles cankle is still the FC files. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, but even David, even the Epstein files, I still don't think that's why he would lose an election. I think you would still have the economy up here and everything else down. Like definitely think the Epstein files would matter. But I still think that I think Trump understands the American media um, a lot. I think he's good at that. And I think Trump knows that American media is fractured. And I think he understands how to play that, you know. And so he's very good at getting attention. Yeah, MAGA won't believe it. Exactly. And I'll just say, and I'll just say this that there's no point trying to get MAGA to vote for Democrats because that's almost never going to happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be like a few people here or there. It's not going to be a lot of people, right? So um, I think American media is afraid of Trump. Yeah, I do. I do think they're afraid of Trump. CBS is now being run by Barry Weiss, who is she's very pro Trump. Um, so very pro Trump. So yeah, so now CBS is starting to, they pulled that 60 Minutes story about El Salvador. So you know, it, it is. So I think they are scared of him. He uses the government to go after media. He uses the government to fire comedians. He's done a lot of bad stuff. You know what I mean? Um, but I think the good news for Democrats is if you get voted out, if Democrats get if Barry Weiss, yeah, without the talent, that's right. Yeah, that's right, Rob. Yeah, exactly. And just so people know, Rob, and you would know this, Barry Weiss, nearly 8 people did not bother to vote. Exactly. Barry Weiss um, was a opinion writer at the New York Times. And to be honest with you, not a very good opinion. I used to read her stuff. She wasn't very good. And um, and she she was never a straight news journalist. She never worked as a straight news journalist. So why would you have someone who's always been an opinion writer who ended up leaving the New York Times and starting her own news organization, which is very hyper focused on a couple of issues, anti woke, Israel, all that sort of stuff. It's very focused on some issues and doesn't really look at that. And it's MAGA friendly. She's never been a straight news journalist. So why they would want someone who has no experience running a straight news journalism plate, working at CBS doesn't make any sense to me unless they were trying to appease Donald Trump, which is what I think they're doing. I think they're trying to appease Donald Trump by putting Barry Weiss in there. So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, I do think there's good news, and that good news is that Trump got voted in by people who don't pay attention to politics because and they got and it was because of economics, right? Now, the bad news for Trump is that he is now the incumbent, right? He's now the incumbent. So everyone who doesn't follow politics now is blaming Trump for rent prices, home prices, cost of living, insurance prices. So he will now get the blame by all those swing voters and independent voters, right? Um, I would prefer they voted against Trump for other reasons, but probably that's going to be the number one reason, right? And Trump will not be able to bring rent prices, home prices, and cost of living down. That's not going to happen, right? So, yeah. So, he's underwater in every poll. Exactly, David. Exactly. He has to own the economy now, no matter how much he tries to blame Biden. Exactly, money. Yeah, it's so maddening that super low info voters are. Yeah, just like yeah, Rob. That is exactly right. It is, Rob. It's exactly right that low information voters, swing states, independents, swing voters, and then it gets worse. And it's most and then you have to target it in swing states. And swing states, they're working class, nothing wrong with working class people, but they're working class people who are generally anti-woke, anti this, anti, that sort of stuff. More low information voters who, so again, that's the reality of the situation. And the other, but again, it it's also to look at it as a bigger issue world, because this is happening all around the world. It's happening. I don't think it's happening. We need to abolish the electoral college. Yeah, David, we do. And David, I don't know if you've ever watched my videos before, but about 2 months ago, I was approached by a Democrat, a Democrat and a Republican, and they're strategists, and they run an organisation which is the National Voting Polling Association. I can't remember what it's called, and they came on I interviewed him on here, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to change the electoral college, and they've actually got, believe it or not, a lot of sway. It's actually, so what they're basically trying to do is they're trying to make it so they're not getting rid of the electoral college as such. What they're actually doing, because that would be, you would need to change the constitution, and that would be too hard. So basically, what they're doing is they're saying they're going state by state, and for example, they could go to Michigan, and they could say to Michigan to sign an agreement that all the electoral college votes from that state goes to whoever wins the popular vote, right? So it doesn't matter if so on all these organizations, and if they get enough to get the 270, it kicks it off, and then it changes the whole system, and the electoral college, it basically doesn't work anymore. And you should look them up. I can't remember what they're called, National Public, but they've been on the Daily Wire with Jon Stewart. They've been on CNN. They've been on all these organizations. I interviewed them about a month ago, and they were brilliant. And they really convinced me of that they're trying to get this thing turned around, to get rid of the electoral college, and they're doing it in a way that is it's the easiest way to do it without changing the constitution. So yeah, so look it up, and maybe even support them if you're in that state, because they need everyone in these states to sign up to this. So yeah, I've seen their info. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I might actually post it on my video again, the interview, because it was a few months ago. But I love talking to them, and one of them is a Democratic strategist, and one of them is a Democratic strategist, and the other one's a Republican. So they're from both areas. So which is important, because you don't want this to be a Democrat thing, because otherwise it won't work. You really need to have both parties doing that. What is the called, please? Yeah. Okay. So I wish I could remember what they are called. Yeah. So some of the people on here, Marnie, I think you were on here when we did it. I think it's called the National Popular the National Popular Vote. The National Popular Vote something. Yeah. Do you mind? So someone mind looking it up? So if you put in National Popular Vote something, yeah, it's called like that. I'll post it online later. Yeah. We need to get rid of the electoral. Yeah. So this is interesting, because it doesn't actually to get rid of the electoral, it would need to be a constitutional thing. But this does the same thing. Yeah, it sounds very close, Joe. Yeah, exactly. This does the same thing, but instead of getting rid of the electoral, it just makes that each state basically can just go, we're going to give all our national popular vote. Yeah, I think it's called the National Popular Vote. That's it. Yeah. It's called something, and I think there's some other stuff to it. Yeah, you can look it up. One of the ones, the Democrat who I spoke to, her name is Alyssa Cass. She's the Democratic strategist that I spoke to on here. But anyway, I think the electoral college, it's a big issue. You know what I mean? It's a big issue, because it means that Democrats have to campaign in a way that National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. There it is. That's it. Thanks, May. National Popular Vote. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Yeah. So it's basically interstate compact. Yeah, it's an interstate. It's a compact of all states together to tick off that any electoral votes goes to whoever wins the popular vote. Some states do that with now. Just so you know, some states have already agreed to this. They've already signed up on this. I can't remember which states they are, but there's a few. And I remember that interview you did, Timmy. Yeah, it was a good interview. I think the audio was really bad from what I remember. I think we had some audio issues, Kimmy. But anyway, yeah. But yeah, it was a fun interview to do. It was so interesting talking to them again. So yeah, and again, like I think it was interesting that that it does show that Democrats have to vote, or they have to campaign in a way that's not 100% natural for Democrats. Do you know what I mean? It's not 100% natural for Democrats. And I actually believe, look, I'm a pragmatist, and I do believe that in politics, sometimes you have to concede some stuff to win elections, because overall you're still going to be better than the other side. I want to give you an example. Um, in Denmark, in Europe at the moment, there's a massive wave of far right wing parties, and they're either winning or they're ahead in the polls. In the UK at the moment, there's a centre left party, Keir Starmer, who's in charge. However, his polling is really bad, and the far right wing party, run by Nigel Farage, who's a far right wing guy, is ahead of the polls by a very, very large margin. If they held the election tomorrow, he would win. And that's the same in a lot of countries in Europe. And the number one reason is immigration, right? Um, so far right wing parties are very good at politicizing immigration and cost of living and putting them together, and making people who don't usually vote for those people want to vote for them. And I'll give you, there's one country in Europe that is beating this trend, and that is Denmark. In Denmark, which is obviously who's in charge of Greenland, so they've been in the news lately. But the person who's in charge, the prime minister of that country, she's a female, a centre left person, and she is very progressive in every way except for immigration. Now, when I say she's not progressive on immigration, I don't mean she is Donald Trump. I don't mean has ICE, people like ICE agents out there or anything. She's not doing any of that. But she does talk tough about immigration, and she does talk tough about how immigrants have to come through a formal thing. We need to know who you are, all this, there has to be a limit, all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, she also says immigration is a fantastic thing for our country, all that. So she's kind of found a middle ground between where you just have not unfettered, but a high immigration, and Donald Trump. And because she's done that, she's basically gotten rid of the far right-wing party. The far right-wing party in Denmark no longer exists. It doesn't exist because without the immigration thing, there needs to be a path. Yeah, without the immigration thing, yeah, that's right, and that's right, and that's what she's not against that path. Yeah, so she's not against immigration. She's not against a pathway. She's not against sending people back home who have been in Denmark for a while. She's kind of like, if I was to say who she's like, I would probably say like Barack Obama. Yeah. But shouldn't it be a federal crime to cross some imaginary line? But yeah. Yeah. So I would say she's like Barack Obama. Maybe. I don't know. I would say that's probably her closest, right? Barack Obama was a lot tougher on immigration than a lot of people realize, right? But at the same time, he wasn't doing all the demonization that he does, right? Now, I can look at someone like that prime minister in Denmark, and you can think, well, no, you know what? That's too tough. Yeah, even though she's not Trump, I want I don't want that, whatever. Now, what she's done, every other thing that she does, healthcare, cost of living, um, safety nets for poor people. Denmark is almost the number one for poor people in the world. I don't think they have almost any homeless people, right? Um, they are, yeah, they're very open to different cultures. They have free schooling. Everything else is very progressive. Now, I guess what I'm saying is you have to what are we willing to concede to stop far right wing parties from becoming the prevalent dominant force, not just in America, Europe, Australia? Because remember, these things seem to happen in trends around the world. Incumbent governments got kicked out all around the world. That was a Western trend. Right wing parties are going up all around the world. So some people might think it's, if you're in America, you're only thinking about America. But a good way to find out what's going to happen in America in 2 years from now is find out what's happening in my country, Europe, Scandinavia, because our cultures are so similar and how we absorb information is so similar that if something is happening in Europe, you could almost certainly expect it to happen in America. Deep-seated baseline, yeah, these immigrant groups for all the problems of society. Yeah. And I'm not saying that now it's very important that if you want to beat far right-wing parties, you just don't become another version of a far right-wing party to beat them, right? But you do have to. Obama deported millions and never knew about it. People didn't get murdered while doing it. Yeah, exactly. Obama did it in a very different way. And I would say the person from Denmark is similar because the person from Denmark is not walking around going cats and dogs and, all that sort of stuff. She doesn't talk like that at all. So she's very respectful of the immigrants. So what I'd say is when I look around the world, it's a scary thing, right? It's a scary thing for me to see so many far right wing groups being so strong. Because here's the thing, I want Europe to be strong because I think the biggest defense against Trump is Europe, right? Europe is the biggest defense against Trump because who else are you gonna have against Trump, right? Just wait until the AI and crypto bubble. Yeah. Who else can go up against Trump? It can't be just Australia. We're too small. New Zealand, China is also an authoritarian government. You don't want them. Russia, you don't want them. So the best options to fight Trump is Europe. Europe is military. When I'm talking about altogether, is militarily very powerful, is culturally very powerful. And so if you put all of that together, you add Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a few other countries like Japan, it's a big pushback against the United States, right? The problem is that if all these far right-wing parties start winning elections in Europe, which is what's look like it's going to happen, Trump is going to have allies all over Europe, including the United Kingdom. And so what could be worse than MAGA in America and a whole bunch of his allies all over Europe, right? It's going to be disastrous. So I look at Denmark and I think maybe that's what people need to be doing. They need to be finding a middle ground, especially while inflation is high, cost of living is high, because the fact of the matter is that immigrants are going to be scapegoated, right? I hope not, Joe. Yeah, immigrants are going to be scapegoated. So, in my opinion, if the option is the real life option, the pragmatic option is we get a whole bunch of MAGAs all over Europe, and then you still have MAGA in America, right? Europe and Canada, yeah, and Canada, yeah. And say Mark Carney gets kicked out as well at some stage, because his polling is actually going down. And so let's say that happens, far right wing parties, right? You're going to have basically, it's going to be dangerous. But we already see that parties. So I want to give you an example. What it will take to Europe to kick out Viktor Orban. Yeah, exactly. And Natalie, do we want more Viktor Orbans in Europe? I don't, right? But Viktor Orban got power by using immigration. Immigration is a big tool to get people because, there is higher than normal immigration in Europe, especially with Syria. When Syria collapsed, millions went into Europe, all that sort of stuff. So, I think at this stage, centre-left parties need to acknowledge something about immigration, not to do what Donald Trump does, but maybe acknowledge that we need to have a pathway to citizenship. However, we want to make sure we understand who's coming in. We want to make sure that there's enough that even though we have immigrants come in, we still have enough services for hospitals and schools. Because remember, now this is interesting. The Prime Minister of Denmark gave a speech about her views on immigration. And this is what she said. She said, my views on immigration are to the left of what my policies are. So she admitted that her views are to the left. But then she said this, and it was amazing. To me, I thought it made sense. She said, in Denmark or in Europe, we have social democratic countries where people pay higher taxes. So in countries like Australia, Europe, social democrat, we pay higher taxes. However, what you get in return is you get better healthcare, fairer healthcare, you get better schools, cheaper schools. So you pay more, but you get back more in return. And what she said is that at the moment, because the immigration levels were quite high in Denmark at that time, is that it was putting some pressure on the schools and it was putting some pressures on the hospitals, and it was meaning that people from Denmark were not getting the same service they were before. And she said by ignoring that, it was making the problem worse. And by not acknowledging that, it was making the problem worse. And those people started moving. These were people that voting for the centre left started going towards the far right. And then as soon as she acknowledged the problem, talked about the problem, but never threw immigrants under the bus, very important, she never threw them under the bus, her polling went up. All she had to do was acknowledge that, yes, in Denmark, because it's a small country, right, and people pay higher taxes, but for that higher taxes, they want something back, that suddenly they did start to notice there was a change, right, in housing and all that sort of stuff. But she acknowledged it. And she realized that the option was her or the far right-wing party who wanted to close the borders to all immigrants, and the far right-wing party wanted to kick out any immigrants that came from Muslim countries and all that. So for her to win the election, she had to do that. She had to be tougher than she was before without being Donald Trump. So I guess what I'm saying is the next Democrat can't be Joe Biden in the first 3 years, right? You have to acknowledge, I think, in my opinion, when I look at the polling, in the US, you get lousy schools, healthcare, social service, yeah, exactly. And you know what? I actually read that in America, immigration is more helpful in American economy than it is in a country like Denmark, right? And the reason why that is because a lot of the immigrants who come from Mexico or South America, they're culturally very similar to Americans. A lot of them actually speak some English, right? A lot of them have actually worked in America illegally, but so they have a relationship with America. A lot of the people that are going into Denmark, they're culturally very different to people. Denmark people are very left-wing. Denmark people are very open about everything. They're they're like, they're very sexually open about things. They're very, culturally. So when people come from countries like Muslim countries who are more conservative, it does, it does clash with their culture a bit because they're very like their women are very progressive and stuff like that. So there is a change to how their culture will start to feel, right? So but overall, they did find that people who came from all countries, including Muslim countries, once they integrated, were a massive positive to Denmark because suddenly they got introduced to all these beautiful foods from, from all these, countries. In Australia, one of the most popular foods in Australia are from Lebanon, right? Uh, from Syria, from a lot from Egypt. We have restaurants all over. Some of the best cultural stuff come from the Middle East. I said that last time here that America is the biggest, richest shithole country on this planet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The US spends more than 26 countries combined in the military. Yeah. So yeah, I just think that the next Democratic Party has to acknowledge has to acknowledge that it can't go back to what it was under the first 3 years because they're just going to get kicked out, right? So I think they have to find like, in my opinion, I would say something like, yes, maybe it was too much under Joe Biden the first couple of years. However, Donald Trump has gone way too much on that side. He's very cruel. He's very this and that like that. Because if you do not acknowledge what happened under Joe Biden, you are not going to win the next election because this is what actually happened. This is actually what the polling shows. The polling actually shows that most people, good point, Joe. I haven't thought of that Latin Americans, it's particularly related to North Americans, but MAGA will refute that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, it, a lot of people will show is that people's on a lot of the immigration, the US adds billions. Yeah, it does. David, there is no country that does immigration better than the United States. No country. Now, part of that is because the people who immigrate to your country are basically neighbors, right? And that does help. Like if New Zealand is our neighbor, right? New Zealand is our neighbor and we're an island. But let's just say, like they're like our. I don't know, if they invaded us, we probably wouldn't even notice, because they're our neighbor. Like people who live next to you are very similar to you. Therefore, culturally, it's not a big change. You know what I mean? Look at Marco Rubio. He's South American. Like half the Republicans are South American or Cuban or whatever. Like it's Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, the online white supremacist. His dad is from Mexico. Nick Fuentes. Yeah. So, I'm just saying that I think for Democrats to win at the next election, it can't be, they have to acknowledge that there was too much under Joe Biden, and they have to acknowledge that there's way too much, it's gone way too cruel under Trump, and that whoever's going to run at the next, and actually, I already know that's what they're going to do. Anybody who does it is going to run with that, because you know how I know that? Because even Bernie Sanders is now talking like that. Even Bernie Sanders said it went too far. Like Bernie Sanders, yeah. So I think the truth of the matter is that Keir Starmer, who's the English Prime Minister, is now talking like the Denmark Prime Minister, right? The people, Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist, and they're a social democratic country. Bernie Sanders often talks about Denmark, right, as a good place, and so I think Bernie Sanders is looking at what Denmark did, and he's thinking about it as a strategy. Without immigration, the population would decline because exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is a massive aging population. There is a massive aging population in America, in Australia, in Europe. Yeah. The only thing I would say to that is you don't want to make it feel, as soon as it starts to feel chaotic, that's when you lose the people. It's that chaotic feel is when you lose the people. And it happened in America, it happened in England, and it happened in Europe. You've got to make it look like there's a process, a proper process. Once you do that, what we're literally from Mexico as an immigrant, that's crazy. Fuentes is insane. What? Yeah, yeah, he is. So his dad is from Mexico and his mum, I think, is Italian. He's got like a mixture of all that. Yeah. So basically, the leader of the young white supremacist movement in America, Nick Fuentes, is part Mexican. Yeah. Only in America can you have a white supremacist who actually isn't white. Do you remember there was an old Dave Chappelle? I really didn't know that about Fuentes. Yeah, yeah. His surname, Fuentes. Um, if if you do you remember it was Dave Chappelle had this TV show called Big and he had this skit, and the skit was basically um was basically about a white supremacist KKK member, but he's blind. So he doesn't actually know that he's black, right? So he thinks he's white, but he's black. So it was like an old skit of Dave Chappelle. And that reminds me of like Nick Fuentes, because half the group of Nick Fuentes, a lot of them, surprisingly, are either Latinos or black people. It's amazing. Like, they're all young. They're like idiots. Like, they're 18, 19. I'm sure most of them will grow out of it, hopefully. But yeah, it's the weirdest white supremacist group I've ever seen in my life, because half of them aren't even white supremacists. They're not, half of them aren't even white. It's just weird. It's like weird. I mean, I saw a picture of Nick Fuentes at a convention, and I couldn't spot one white person in the picture. It's like a white supremacist group with no white people in it. It's one of the yeah, yeah. So yeah, so basically, so yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, I want to say I'm really worried about seeing these far right wing parties gaining traction all over the world and then connecting together with Trump, right? I don't want it to be like this satellite states all under like the MAGA umbrella. And I do think that people have to be like, we have to do something about, you know, we have to acknowledge, so you have to acknowledge something about immigration without becoming Donald Trump. And I think it's the only way to stop the far right wing parties from going in there. And then what happens is you can allow, because in Denmark, they still have immigration. They still have people immigrating into Denmark. It's just that I look at the leader of the Proud Boys, Tario, which is a white supremacist. Yes, right, that's right. Yeah. Well, the problem is, Connie, is that America is so full of culturally diverse people that when the KKK was around, there weren't a lot of when the KKK was around, it was mostly a white America, right? Mostly white America. Now, America's demographics have changed so dramatically, it's hard to get a movement going where everyone is white. He was a black white supremacist. Then there was yeah, that's right. He was a black white supremacist. That's right. Yeah. A black blind white supremacist. Yeah, yeah. Bigsy, I think his name, Steve Martin in the joke, I was born a poor black person. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think, I think that's why I think the whole white identity politics thing is gaining traction. A lot of people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, a lot of people in that group, they're very obsessed about white people being targeted, or white people being, targeted by other groups. Like Chappelle, yeah, about white people looking at, they look at white people the same way as they look at themselves, like MLK, did with black people. They kind of think that white people are being attacked, vilified. They often will say you have to apologize when you're white. They actually said this. When Trump was elected, they said, this is great. We no longer have to apologize for being white. I mean, I guess I'd say to that is who who was forced to apologize for being white? Because I don't remember anybody being forced to apologize for being white. So, you know, again, they just make things up, right? But the reason why I think the victim white group is gaining traction, I actually do think it's bigger than people realize because they don't see themselves as racist, right? They're not saying they don't see themselves. That's what. Yeah, I don't. They don't see themselves as um, we're better than black people. What they're saying, they're telling a different story to KKK. KKK were telling the story of black people are uncivilized, black people are this, whatever, right? The story being told now is more palatable to the average American because they're saying is we are the new black people. What happened to black people is now happening to white people, right? Which is ridiculous, which is absurd. But that's how they do it. That's how they're telling the story. And when you tell the story from a point of view, yeah, yeah. When you tell the story from the point of view of a victim, it's harder to um whites will be the minority and yeah, future America as a white person, it doesn't bother me. But yeah, exactly. And that's the other element. They know that eventually white people will become the minority, right? They know it eventually it might be 30 or 40 years, but eventually it will happen, right? So there's there's fear from that. There's fear from that. And if for someone like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, who come from South Africa, right? Who who grew up under apartheid in South Africa, and then Nelson Mandela was elected, and then suddenly white people didn't have the control that they did anymore, right? Um, and then so they thought, that black people was getting revenge on them, which was actually not true. Nelson Mandela was against that sort of thing, but because they believe that and they come from that country, they import those views to themselves. So people like Elon Musk, who see life through the prism of South Africa, will look at the Great Replacement theory as what happened in South Africa will happen in America. They see everything through the prism of South Africa, and so they think America will turn into South Africa, right? So it's coming from a different view than the KKK, which is why they can get away with it, right? Which is why it's more palatable to people. Because if you go around saying black people this, black people that, that's not going to work as well. But if you say, no, 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 it's not about that. It's about we're being attacked. We're now the victims. We're now the black people. We have to apologize for being white. So we're the ones who are going to be vilified in the future when we are the minority. We will become the minority. So I think that's why they get away with it. So, again, because, they're always pointing to the future when they will be the minority. It's such a simplistic way to look at the world, right? Because a lot of people, if you look at people who come from different cultures, right, in Australia, right, I grew up in a very multicultural area of Sydney, Australia. And most of the people around me were from Greece, Italy, some parts of Asia, or all different types of cultures and stuff like that. And their parents didn't speak English. Their parents were the first people in the country, usually. And so, but the people that I knew, the people that I went to school with, their English was perfect because they grew up in Australia, or they were here from a very early age, and they were the most Aussie sounding people on the planet. So it again doesn't make any sense because the parents who come here, right, will just bring, yeah, are you will come here and bring different cultures, which makes life more. The other thing is, I never forget watching this video in the UK, because the UK at the moment has this big thing about immigrants in the UK. And I watched these far right wing people who did this video, right? And in the video, they were talking about how there was too many immigrants in the UK and that we need to go back to more white people. And then as soon as the video finished, they said, "Oh, let's go get some butter chicken from the local Indian restaurant." Right? So these people spent the day protesting against immigrants, and then at night time they're going to spend their night eating Indian food, right? And I'm sure these people would love Italian food. I'm sure these people would love, food from Asia and all these people, and they would. So they want all the benefits of different cultures, but they don't want, without the actual people who come from those cultures in that country. And so again, it's, the most interesting things about a country is the different melting pots of different cultures. Australia would be so boring if the only people here were from England. It would be so boring here, right? It would be the most boring country on the planet. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, I think these people are not living in reality. As each generation goes by, they become more assimilated into that society. In Australia, the friends that I grew up, whose parents came from Italy or Asia and stuff like that, they're Australian. Like so yeah, makes people, yeah. So saying for Americans, you go to eat Mexican and Celebro and protest. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They'll protest. I mean, the amount of Americans who love Taco Bell or love some sort of like other restaurant that I hear of. I mean, most of the restaurants I hear about in America, they're from like other countries. They love it. They love it. And yet they don't want they don't want the people to be here. So, you know, and generally speaking, a lot of these people are generally not the most, they have no idea how white privilege has worked. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, and that's the thing, like, I think I think the good thing about um, people being, together, whether it's white or black or Asian, is the race thing is no longer becomes an element of society, and we just, and Mexican food is one of my favorites, but yeah, that's right, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it just doesn't make any sense because every country that is cosmopolitan that people want to live in is very multicultural. I would say the only exception to that is Japan. Japan is very homogenous. Is not big on foreigners. I've been there a couple of times myself. It's a great country. I still like Japan. It's a great country, but they have a big problem in Japan. And the problem is they have an aging population, and all their young people are fleeing. So there's not enough young people paying taxes for the old people to survive. So the policy of only having Japanese people is killing their economy, and it's affecting all the people. So now they've had to change the policy and allow a lot more new people to immigrate to Japan. And what they're finding is it's actually made their country more interesting, right? It's made it a more interesting country because a lot of people in Japan, they like Italian food, but it's very hard to get in Japan because there's not many other cultures. So a lot of people in Japan now are great. I can eat Chinese, I can eat this, I can eat that. So it's been a big positive for Japan to open up its country to more different cultures and things like that. And it's often you will hear a lot of people on the right use Japan as an example, but Japan is moving away from that because it's killing their economy and it's sending all their young people overseas to look for better jobs. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks, guys. I have to go soon. I have to go now, actually. I'm a bit behind, but thank you so much, guys. It was so nice, interesting talking to you guys. Hopefully, there's a change in America soon, and we can do that. How can bands just lie on TV when there is no much evidence? Yeah, Kimmy, he lies all the time. He lies as he breathes. He lies so much. Thanks, Kimmy. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks. Good night. Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate that. Thanks, Car. Thanks again for coming. I really appreciate that. Talk to you soon on the other side. Thank you. Thanks, Dave from California. Great to see you. See you guys. Good night. Good to